Europe is cracking at the seams. For the first time in 800 years, a tectonic rift has opened that could tear the continent in half. An entire country could collapse into the ground at any minute. Over 17,000 earthquakes have occurred here in the last year. The Earth is literally splitting between two continents, but now this rift is turning into a deadly trap. Tectonic plates are diverging at a speed of 2 cm per year, and recently, the process has accelerated many times over. Every day, new cracks kilometers long are forming. Lava gushes from the Earth's depths, burning houses and roads. Toxic gases poison the air for hundreds of kilometers around. But this is not just a regional catastrophe. Eruptions could eject so much ash into the atmosphere that air communication across all of Europe will be paralyzed for long months. In 2010, a modest eruption of one local volcano stopped thousands of flights in a week. What is preparing now could be tens of times more powerful. Today we will talk about what is happening underground in Northern Europe, about cities disappearing in Earth's cracks, why one of the planet's most dangerous rifts formed in this country, and what consequences await us if this rift continues its activity. Imagine a place on Earth where giant tectonic plates literally diverge beneath your feet, increasing the crack by 2 cm each year. This is the new reality of the island nation Iceland in Northern Europe. The island is located on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates meet. Essentially, this is the only place on Earth where an underwater oceanic rift emerges onto land. And here among picturesque landscapes and hot springs hides one of the most powerful geological bombs. For more than 800 years, the Reykjanes Peninsula in southwestern Iceland peacefully slumbered. Local residents grew accustomed to periodic earthquakes. For Icelanders, this is part of daily life. Scientists knew about the rift's existence, periodically studied it, but it caused no particular concern. Tourists came here by the millions to bathe in the famous Blue Lagoon and watch the northern lights. Everything changed at the end of 2019. First, there were small underground tremors, then they became stronger and more frequent. By February, 2021 seismographs were recording the most intense sequence of earthquakes in this area in the last 100 years. On March 3, 2021 occurred what hadn't happened here for 8 centuries. The volcano awakened. This was an unusual eruption, not from a crater to which everyone was accustomed. The Earth simply split, forming a long fissure from which lava gushed. This is called a fissure eruption, and it looks like gates to hell, a fiery river that burst directly from the planet's depths. However, the first eruption turned out relatively calm. Tourists even had picnics next to the flows, taking selfies against the magma backdrop. It seemed nature was simply staging a beautiful show. But scientists sounded the alarm. They understood this was only the beginning. Over 3 years, from 2021 to 2024, 12 eruptions already occurred on the Reykjanes Peninsula. Each new one was unpredictable. Magma accumulated underground. The Earth swelled by tens of centimeters in just a few days, and then a new fissure and new lava flows. The city of Grindavik, built on lava flows from 800 years ago, had to be evacuated. 4,000 people were left homeless, and their native city is now in a zone of constant danger. The latest eruption was particularly dramatic. A fissure more than 2 km long formed from which lava gushed directly toward houses. Rescuers tried to build protective dams, but molten rock found new paths. But most terrible was not what was happening on the surface, but understanding what was occurring underground. When geologists began analyzing data, the picture was frightening. It turned out that beneath Iceland, not just one volcano awakened, but an entire rift system. Magma was accumulating not in one place, but at 3 different points under 2 volcanic systems of the peninsula. This meant only one thing: Iceland entered a new geological epoch. This is a new episode of tectonic plate separation that could continue for several years or even decades. But why did the rift that slumbered for 8 centuries awaken precisely now? The answer lies in the cyclical nature of geological processes. Analysis of ancient lava flows and historical texts showed an amazing pattern. Approximately every 800 to 1,000 years, the Reykjanes Peninsula experiences a period of turbulent volcanic activity. The last such period was in the 10th to 13th centuries, when a series of powerful eruptions literally reformatted the region's landscape. Scientists explain this by Iceland's unique location. The island is not simply at the boundary of two tectonic plates. It stands directly above the Icelandic mantle plume, a gigantic column of molten rock rising from Earth's depths. This plume works like an underground engine, constantly feeding volcanoes with magma. But sometimes, pressure reaches a critical point and then begins what geologists call a rifting episode. The process looks roughly like this. Magma accumulates underground, creating enormous pressure. Earth's crust cannot withstand it, and cracks forming new channels for lava exit. Simultaneously, tectonic plates begin diverging faster than usual. If in quiet times they move apart at 2 cm per year during active phase, this process accelerates many times over. Scientists are particularly troubled by the behavior of Askja volcano in central Iceland. This giant last erupted in 1961, and before that staged such an explosion in 1875 that ash reached Scandinavia. Now Askja behaves extremely suspiciously. Over 3 years, it has risen 80 cm. An Askja eruption could be comparable in power to Mount St. Helens volcano eruption in the USA in 1980. Then the explosion released energy equivalent to 25,000 atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima. The mountain peak was sliced off by the explosion, like with a guillotine, and ash rose to 24 km height. But even this might seem like child's play compared to what Icelandic volcanoes can do at full power. In 1783, Laki volcano erupted for 8 months straight, ejecting so much poisonous gas into the atmosphere that Europe experienced a year without summer. Temperature dropped several degrees. Crops died, famine began in France. This became one of the causes of the Great Revolution of 1789. And in 2010 here, an eruption of a volcano with an unpronounceable name paralyzed aviation across all Europe for a week. Economic losses amounted to billions of dollars, and this despite the eruption being quite weak by Icelandic standards. Now scientists are trying to understand the main thing. How long will the new activity cycle last? Historical data shows previous periods lasted from 50 to 300 years. If statistics are to be believed, we face living with constant eruption threat for another 2 to 3 centuries. But eruptions in Iceland are only the tip of the iceberg of a much more serious problem. Recently, scientists discovered that current volcanic awakening here may be connected not only to Earth's rifting, but also to global climate change. And here begins a truly interesting story. The fact is, Iceland is covered by glaciers, or rather was covered. Over the last 130 years, the island lost 16% of ice cover, with half of this volume lost in just the last 30 years. By century's end, another half of what remains will disappear. It would seem ice melts. This is normal with climate warming. However, geologists discovered that ice is not just frozen water. It's also a gigantic press weighing billions of tons pressing on Earth's crust. When glaciers disappear, this press is removed and land begins rising. The process is called isostatic rebound, and it can seriously affect volcanic activity. Earth's crust, under disappearing glaciers, rises, pressure changes in magmatic chambers, new cracks form. Magma gets new paths to reach the surface. Historical data confirms this connection. When 10 to 15,000 years ago, glaciers of the last ice age retreated from Iceland, the island's volcanoes went wild. Eruption frequency increased 30 to 50 times. This was real geological hell. Lava flows changed the island's shape. Ash buried surrounding seas. But most terrible turned out further. Iceland is not the only place on the planet where such changes can occur. Scientists compiled the first global database of volcanoes located under glaciers or near them. The results shocked them. Such volcanoes numbered 245 worldwide. They're scattered from the Andes to North America's Cascade Mountains, from Alaska to Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, from Antarctica to Europe's mountain ranges. And particularly frightening, 160 million people live within 100-kilometer radius of these potential catastrophes. Alaskan volcanoes cause special alarm. There is active Redoubt stratovolcano, which in case of eruption could cover with ash the entire air transport network between Asia and North America. and Katmai volcano in 1912 staged such an explosion that sound was heard several thousand kilometers away, and ash fell even in Canada. In Antarctica, dozens of volcanoes hide under ice. If they awaken due to glacier melting, consequences will be hard to predict. One large subglacial explosion could accelerate ice sheet melting, leading to dangerous sea level rise worldwide. Speaking of rifts, of course, Iceland is far from the only place with a huge rift. Earth is literally strewn with gigantic rifts, and some are in the world's most densely populated regions. Most famous and one of most dangerous is the San Andreas Fault in California. It runs directly through San Francisco and Los Angeles cities where millions live. In 1906, the fault already showed its power staging, a San Francisco earthquake of magnitude over 7 points. The city was practically wiped off Earth's face. At the other end of the Pacific Ocean is the Pacific Ring of Fire, a chain of volcanoes and rifts encircling the entire ocean. But let's return to Iceland. Today, this country has turned into a living laboratory for studying our planet's future. What's happening here right now could be a harbinger of global changes for which humanity is completely unprepared. Grindavik City became a symbol of new reality. Just a few years ago, this was a thriving fishing port where 4,000 people lived. Today, it's a ghost town where houses collapse into cracks and streets are covered with solidified lava. Authorities officially recognize the city could completely collapse underground. Underground cavities formed after eruptions make soil unstable. At any moment, entire neighborhoods could simply disappear. The geothermal station supplying electricity and hot water to more than 30,000 people is under constant threat. The famous Blue Lagoon, which annually received millions of tourists, has been closed for almost a year. This geothermal resort that became Iceland's symbol is now in a high danger zone. But evacuated residents from Iceland are only the first climate refugees of a new era. Scientists warn that if their forecasts are correct, millions of people worldwide could find themselves in similar situations. Glacier melting and volcano awakening will create a new category of migrants, those fleeing not from war or poverty, but from dangerous natural phenomena. An international research group from 12 scientific institutions received government funding for a large-scale project studying connections between climate change and Earth's subsurface activity. Preliminary data is already shocking. Computer models show that by centuries end eruption frequency in regions with melting glaciers could increase several times. This concerns not only Iceland but also Alaska, the Andes Alps, and Caucasus. Alpine resorts where millions ski could turn into zones of volcanic activity. In the Russian Caucasus under Elbrus ice-hide magmatic chambers. If climate warming accelerates, this sleeping giant over 5,000 meter high could awaken. Elbrus's last eruption was about 2,000 years ago, but the volcano is considered potentially active. In the Alps, glaciers melt, even faster than in Iceland. Over the last 150 years, they lost half their volume. Under some of them, ancient volcanic structures might lie. Alaska is especially vulnerable. Here lies the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, result of the most powerful 1912 eruption. Novarupta volcano then ejected 30 times more material than Mount St. Helens eruption. Ash fell even in Canada. Now, Alaska's glaciers melt at record pace, and local volcanoes could react to this with awakening. Residents of one Icelandic city who lost their homes became first but far from last, witnesses of a new geological epoch. An epoch when climate changes awaken not only hurricanes and floods, but forces from Earth's depths. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel.